This story is about the consequences whenever humanity plays God. Morgan is a genetically engineered human growing up under the watchful eye of scientists. And under their care, they have given her an environment where she can explore and understand her own emotions. But things have gotten more complicated when Morgan attacked Dr. Kathy. And now Synsect has sent an auditor to assess the situation and Morgan's fate. Lee is a risk management consultant sent by head office to investigate what happened. She's all businesslike and has been given full authority to conduct the audit as she sees fit. Ted shows Lee her room and after a short while is introduced to Dr. Amy, the project's chief behaviorist. Lee then gets introduced to Skip, the nutritionist. And she meets Dr. Kathy and Brenda shortly after. Lee requests to speak to Kathy in private where she explained that it wasn't Morgan's fault that she was attacked. Kathy defended Morgan's actions and tells Lee that Morgan was probably just confused and upset about the decision that she can't go to the lake that day. Next on the agenda is Dr. Ziegler. He explains the process that made Morgan. Synthetic DNA is created and nanomachines are ingeniously introduced into the neural network and accelerating the growth of the specimen. Morgan, as it turns out, is already their third attempt in this experiment. The first attempt exposed initial problems with the specimen's body, while the second attempt, although more successful in its physical growth, hasn't developed mentally enough and had to be terminated. This reinforced their idea to introduce emotions to the subject's programming early in its development. And after 2 years, they have succeeded in conceiving Morgan. Morgan's growth has been phenomenal. In a month, she can already walk and talk, and has the capacity to make her own decisions and feel emotions. An ideal hybrid biological organism. Dr. Ziegler spoke with such pride, like Morgan is his own daughter, and in a way she is the entire team's child, having raised Morgan since birth. But when Lee brings back the topic of Morgan attacking Kathy, Ziegler downplays it as Morgan just overreacting. Yet he added that despite this setback, he still believes that the project is headed in the right direction. It's now time to meet Morgan. They take Lee to meet Dr. Darren, who's currently monitoring Morgan. Lee greets Morgan and she's surprised that Morgan already knows who she is and what her audit is about, which is to assess Morgan's potential to be a product of Synsect, the company funding this research. Morgan also mentioned how sorry and remorseful she was at what she did to Kathy. However, Lee looks as passive as ever without showing any hint of emotion. Then Ted tells Morgan to get some rest since she'll be undergoing psych evaluation tomorrow. During dinner that night, the team asks Lee what a risk management consultant does, and she flatly replies that she basically assesses risk against anticipated profit. This produced a mocking grunt from Ziegler. When Lee asked about how Brenda and Darren ended up in a relationship, they mentioned that Morgan actually brought them together. They all see Morgan as their own child. And again, they defended her actions earlier, claiming how she's only an innocent 5 years old who's still learning and deserves to make mistakes once in a while. Then Dr. Cheng enters the room. Dr. Cheng coldly welcomes Lee and asks how the situation in Iceland is doing. Lee tells her that it's all under control, which implies that there must have been another lab there doing the same project as the team here. But there has been a tragic incident and 21 people are killed. Ziegler assures Dr. Cheng that this isn't Iceland and Morgan is more advanced, unlike the crude prototypes there. After dinner, Dr. Cheng tells Lee in private that it was cruel of them to introduce Morgan to the outdoors when she's going to spend much of her time locked inside her room, and Cheng regrets ever letting her out. That same night, after Lee is done reviewing Morgan's earlier footage, Amy decides to pay Morgan a visit. She disables the cameras and tells Morgan that everything will be okay and to think back to her memories back in the forest whenever she's sad. This brings a flashback of them both walking through the woods and encountering a wounded deer. But after realizing that the injury is fatal, Morgan didn't think twice about ending its suffering. The next day, corporate psychologist Dr. Shapiro arrives at the facility to conduct Morgan's psych evaluation. Apparently, he's a leading expert in evaluating fourth-wave artificial intelligence and has the arrogance to match. He's also offended when the team planned for him to sit on a chair outside the glass enclosure. But even though Ziegler assures him that it's for his own safety, Shapiro demands to sit inside with Morgan to build trust. The evaluation begins with Shapiro asking Morgan basic questions like how she felt when she hurt Kathy. Morgan replies that she's sad, of course, because Kathy is her friend, as well as the whole team. Then the questions took a darker turn when Shapiro asks her if she thinks that the whole team sees her as their friend, because people don't lock up their friends in cages. Morgan is starting to get agitated, but Shapiro ruthlessly presses further. She tells him that she loves Kathy and it was an error in judgment. Shapiro then asks Morgan if she will love him if, for example, he recommends that Morgan be allowed to go out into the lake. Morgan is getting confused when Shapiro drops a big one. He asks what she would do hypothetically if he recommends to corporate that Morgan be locked in a cage forever. And also, what if he recommends that she be terminated on the spot? This is where Morgan loses it. The rest of the team scramble to contain the situation to no avail.
Get the fuck out, okay?
Lee steps in, but a power outage gives Morgan the opening to escape. Morgan steps out and sees Amy from a distance, but Lee was able to subdue her in time. And by the time Morgan wakes up, she's completely restrained. She's anxious and concerned about what's going on, but Cheng assures her that it's what's best for her. Apparently, Cheng is planning on terminating Morgan, and Lee has already advised the head office about what happened, and a cleanup crew will arrive the next morning. Ziegler is strongly against it since creating new life is a massive achievement and cannot just be thrown away, but Cheng tells him to stop and go back to his room. And so, doctors Cheng and Brenda prepare the chemicals to terminate Morgan while she begs and cries and promises to be better. Cheng's last words to Morgan before she falls asleep were, "We failed you," then leaves. However, Darren and Brenda couldn't bring it within them to terminate Morgan, having grown attached to her growing up, and the two of them also leave. Now it's up to Lee to do the task, but Ted tries to stop her. After getting him out of the way, Amy shoots her with a tranquilizer dart, knocking her out. When she wakes up, she finds herself locked up in Morgan's room. The rest of the team pack up and get ready to rescue Morgan and leave with her. In the meantime, Darren tries to wake Morgan up and lets her know that everything will be okay. Morgan, however, has already decided that everyone is her enemy, everyone but Amy. After dealing with Darren, Ted tries to stop her. But his emotions got in his way and failed. Lee witnesses everything and asks Morgan to stop, but she replies that she finally feels like herself. Morgan leaves Lee locked up and goes with Amy. Brenda is preparing the car when Amy shows up. She desperately asks where Darren is and what happened to him, but Amy was speechless. Morgan shows up and threatens to kill her, but Brenda manages to resist Morgan for a bit. But in the end, Morgan was just too powerful. Morgan goes into the house to confront her mother, Cheng. But Kathy shows up, so she finishes her first. Cheng was finishing up her report when Morgan arrives. Cheng tells Morgan the truth about her, which is she is created to be a living weapon for Sunsect. Morgan finally accepts it and says goodbye to her mother. Meanwhile, Lee desperately tries to break the glass cage and instead finds another way out through the top window. Skip finds her and she tells him to get his rifle ready since Morgan has gone rogue. They both team up, and while Skip tries to convince Amy to stop, Lee goes in the house only to find that Ziegler has taken his life and Cheng is gone. Morgan appears and the two duel for a bit before crashing out of the window. Skip moves in to stop Morgan but gets taken down. Morgan then gets in the car and escapes the compound together with Amy. Lee tries to give chase, but Morgan's driving skills far surpass her own despite Morgan having no experience yet. Skip eventually catch up and the two of them drive all the way out in the lake, which is Morgan's favorite place. Meanwhile, Morgan takes Amy through the forest and into the lakeside and takes a moment together to appreciate its beauty. Lee tells Skip to stay behind and ventures into the forest alone. But she doesn't know the path to the lake, so she decided to invite Morgan to attack her instead. Morgan reacts to the gunshot and goes in to hunt Lee down. She finds Lee and they both fight it out. Morgan has the upper hand the entire fight and impales Lee on a tree stump, yet she decides not to finish Lee off. Morgan returns to Amy, but Amy threatens her to stop. She realizes that Amy has now also become her enemy and tensely moves closer. But Lee has survived her injuries and finishes off Morgan. Lee then takes the gun from Amy and to her surprise, Lee shoots her. Lee then makes her way to a waiting Skip who makes the mistake of asking too much about what happened, so she has to shoot him too.
Just wait a second, Lee.
While the cleanup crew is busy with their job, Sunsect executives reflect on what happened. They regret having to terminate the L9 project, which is Morgan, despite having huge potential and emotional growth. They also praise Lee's judgment and the way she handled the situation without hesitation. Here we learn that Lee was the result of the L4 project, which is far inferior from Morgan's development. Lee was also a hybrid biological organism, and she does the same hand gesture habits that Morgan does when stressed. That's it for today's story. Thank you again for staying until the end, and if you liked it, please like and subscribe to this channel. Let me know if there's a movie that you would like me to recap, and I'll see you on the next one.